So, Jeremie Celdran, I've known you for about a year now. I know a fair bit about you, but the audiences might not. So, welcome. This is episode 148 or 58. Tim would know. You know? Okay. So, welcome. I'd like you to take a minute and just tell us a little bit about you, introduce yourself any way you like, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Look, in a minute or so, I'm a finance professional with 25 years experience, out of which the last 20, believe it or not, with the same company, with a French pharmaceutical and global healthcare company called Sanofi. And throughout my career, I've had the chance to have a really wide array of roles and responsibilities spanned across the 5 continents, from very back office to very front office in finance. And I've done that at country, region, and global level. And well, throughout the years, I've developed basically 2 sets of expertise and 1 passion. So my first expertise is around risk management and process improvement. And that's basically half of my career in assurance functions. So external audit, internal audit, finance support, internal control, compliance. And my second skill set is the one that really drives me. It's driving the performance, the financial performance of our commercial operations. This is really hands-on, very close to the business. And that's the other half of my career as country controller, zone controller, and then regional head of finance for our vaccine GBU. And my passion is around people management and talent development, because I've had the privilege to manage people from very early on in my career.
Okay. So up until 2021, you were in you were in France?
Up until 2021, I was in Singapore.
Singapore, okay. And you then came here. Was there an option that Sanofi gave you as to, hey, you're a mobile role, you're going to go somewhere next? And was that an option, or it was just, hey, you're going to Australia? Did you have any say in that?
It was, if I have to be honest, it was probably more the latter than the former. So when I was in Singapore, I was a regional head for finance, supporting our vaccines, commercial operations, and overseeing all Asian countries except China. And then end of 2019, beginning 2020, with our new CEO, we had a change of organization. And they decided to move the regional office for Asia to Sydney, with a focus on mature countries, while emerging were going in another bucket, in an international bucket. So I was offered the opportunity to actually follow and to come to Australia, which was a bit of a tough decision on the personal side, because we came here on a local contract. So effectively what it meant is that we had to make a life choice to sever the ties with my home country, that is France, to come to Australia and to settle. And that's the choice we've made. And then we are 3 years down the line, and we are very happy because my family is ecstatic, and then we love this country. And yeah, we want to stay.
Okay. You came in the heat of, everything that was happening with COVID. You're also in a business that was, very involved in a division, which was vaccines, right? So as a back office role, coming to Australia and being blocked away from all the opportunities living in Australia had to offer, what did that mean for you?
Look, Josh, the first year, 2021, was a write-off. Simply and purely. I mean, we arrived in quarantine for the first 2 or 3 weeks. Then we actively and quite desperately looked for a place to live, discovering the complexity and the fun of the real estate market in Sydney. And when we finally found a place, we went lockdown, right? From April until I think it was October.
Yeah.
So the entire year was a total write-off, and probably one of the toughest years. I thought 2020 was the toughest year I had to experience because job change, pandemic. I also lost my mom in 2020, and I thought, okay, it can only go easier from there. No, there was 2021 that got even harder. So yeah, it was tough because we were in a new country and couldn't socialize. Had to homeschool our oldest while taking care of the 3-year-old, which was obviously a handful. So
How old was the oldest?
The oldest at the time was 7.
Okay.
6. And yeah, that was really incredibly tough. I thought we wouldn't survive, to be honest. What really saved us is the very small community and friends that we could make literally around the house, and that helped us through. And we discovered the legendary hospitality and kindness of Australian people, and I think that's how probably we got hooked with this country. But yeah, it was incredibly tough, and at the same time, as you were pointing out, I had a job to do, which was probably less challenging in the sense that I knew the teams already. So there wasn't that challenge of getting into a new country, being locked down, having to do a job with people that you don't know. So that was kind of easy in a way. The challenge was really more on the personal part.
Okay. How would you, so you've 20 years doing what you're doing, you've moved to a few countries around the world. Where have you gone to so far? You've gone to Singapore, you're now in Australia. Where have you been?
Look, I grew up, I'm French, born in France, born in Paris, but I grew up in Spain. Then I went to the US for a year to finish my studies, to do an MBA.
Okay.
Went back to France to start my professional career. Probably spent 7 years. That was probably the longest time I was in one city. 7 years in Paris, and then I joined Sanofi. Started in Paris. Went to Panama for my first international experience.
What year was this when you started at Sanofi?
2004.
Okay,
so 20 years ago. First 3 years based in Paris with a global role and traveling the planet. I was internal auditor, so basically spending 50% of my time in planes. And then my first international assignment was in Panama, where I spent 4 years overseeing Latin America for the pharma business, so basically everything but vaccines. From there, I moved to Johannesburg, where I met my wife. Landed bachelor, left with a 6-month pregnant wife, back to France for a 3-year stint, then Singapore, and then Sydney.
Okay.
So literally on the five continents for Sanofi.
And 20 years within the same business. Tell me a little bit about that, what that journey feels like to you, and obviously moving up the ladder from, the role that you were first within as an audit role, and now to, the head of finance in Australia for the vaccines division. Tell me about that journey and what you've learned from your perspective.
Look, it's hard to acknowledge that I've been 20 years with the same company because I feel like I've been probably through 5 different companies and 5 different CEOs, as many changes in strategy. So that's one. First, the diversity of MNC's life, the fact that every 3 years everything changes. The fact that I've lived on the 5 continents, the fact that I've had very, very diverse jobs. again, and supporting all businesses and all functions at one point in time. So I don't feel like I've been in one single business or in one single role for 20 years. It's been very, very rich. What was your question, Josh, initially?
The journey, no, that's okay. The journey, what that feels like to you after 20 years. I think you somewhat answered the question. You've been in Australia now since 2021, so that's almost 3 years. And before that, you were in Singapore. Obviously, being in the 5 different continents, you've seen a lot of ways of working, a lot of cultural differences. What does that feel like now that you're in Australia? And how do you compare that to, the most recent one before Australia being Singapore, for example?
Easy. I think the simple answer to your question is being in Australia is extremely easy.
In what way?
In the way that is, I'm a Latin guy, but I married an Anglo-Saxon. My wife is South African with a British passport. And for me, this is a very easy culture to fit with. And then on top of that, it's close to who I am. I think Australians are straight to the point,
direct,
no BS, effective in their ways of working, and giving a lot of value to the quality of life. So very easy to be in Australia, and that's probably why so many compatriots that have tasted this beautiful country have done what I'm about to do, which is to settle and to stay, because this is very easy. The most probably challenging, the biggest cultural challenge probably I had to face, believe it or not, was in a Latin country, in Panama, where in Latin America emotions run extremely high, and it's a level of proximity that was even uncomfortable for a Latin guy like myself. Just let me give you a concrete example to illustrate my point. When I arrived at the affiliate, the executive assistant who kindly assisted me with my welcome saw me and said, "Hola, mi amor." So literally translate as "Hello, my love." And so I asked her, but then what do you say to your husband or to your boyfriend? And she looked at me with some kinky eyes and she says, "Papacito." So, that's just an illustration of the fact that, you had to deal with very high emotions as a standard of a professional display in the professional environment. And you had also to be extremely aware of that, to be able to navigate your way. And I had to face, because I was inadequate, I had to face my first real failure when it came to people management. Because when I did one of my moves, because in Panama I had 3 jobs in 4 years. I arrived finance support, back office, and then I had a fantastic boss who believed in me and who swapped me from back office to front office with no experience whatsoever in controlling. And he put me straight as a controlling manager for the entire region with 5 people to manage directly and a team of 20, 25. And in my team, I had a young female talent that I failed to retain because I failed to understand how to manage her. And she decided to leave. And after that, I went through probably my first challenge as a manager. I was given a coach.
Talk to me a little bit about how you failed to manage her.
Well,
Was it part of the cultural difference that you were alluding to?
I think it was that. I think I wasn't showing her enough love.
I see.
And her previous manager, the colleague and now friend that I took over from, was an Uruguayan guy with also the heart on his sleeve and a very flamboyant manager, very charming, and the first one to greet his team by "Hello, my love. How are you, my love?"
So the way that display of emotion within the professional setting was accepted and expected by them was not something that you were giving to this particular team member.
Right,
Okay.
right. I think that the maybe failing to acknowledge or to give her the attention that she was getting before, and that I was not giving her specifically to her. I was treating my team equally, and I was trying also to survive because I was learning the job, you know. And but the first year was extremely tough. I had to learn the job and to manage.
This was
the team.
2004.
And that was 2009.
That was 2009. So
Yeah, so
about
15 years ago.
15 years ago. So
But
you
that
were
shaped
given
me
a
as a
coach.
manager.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
know? That shaped me as a manager, and yeah, that coach that I had for 3 months that really required me to deeply look inside myself and to grow as a person and to understand my blind spots, and was a game changer for me. And I think that's what made me hopefully the good leader that I've been later on in my career, and also why I've enjoying managing people so much, because it's extremely it's extremely challenging.
How long did you spend with that coach?
3 months.
3 months. Was that sort of
3 months.
What did that journey look like?
3 months. We had a weekly 2 hours time together on Friday mornings, and I remember her very well. She was a former finance professional who decided to move into coaching, so she knew what the job was about, and she was an incredible coach because she never gave me anything, but she gave me the tools to
Figure
come
it
up
out.
exactly. And to ask myself the right questions and to come up with the right answers, which is really what coaching is about. I'm a coach myself now, trying to give back.
Yeah, okay.
And the toughest part is to stay away from giving advice. You know, when you talk to people who've been through what you've been before, you want to load them with advice,
Because now you have the exact answer. But
well, you have
don't
some
wanna-
of them, at
Yeah.
least, and you need to refrain,
Yeah.
from doing that, and just ask the right questions to help them come up themselves with their own path.
Okay. So that was 2009, 3 months of coaching. And you then went from Panama to Johannesburg. Yeah?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. What did that look like as a contrast to Panama?
Huge change. And I remember because I challenged my boss when he invited me to take that job in Johannesburg as a country, or yes, a cluster controller, right? South Africa and all the satellite countries. There was about 10 countries forming the south cone of South Africa, and I was coming from a regional controlling job. So I challenged my boss. I was like, I'm ready to be CFO. Why? He says, you need to, it's two different things, to be consolidating and doing the job. So you have to go. And that was, he was absolutely right, obviously. The job, although I thought it was similar, was quite different because I had to be really hands-on and to be responsible of the numbers in a culture that was drastically different. And there are a lot of traits between South Africans and Australians that I find similar, right? Countries that are very far away from the rest of the world, countries of pioneers where the environment and the nature is rough, and where people are direct, straight to the point, extremely professional. And my boss, the CFO, the country CFO, was a British, or South African of British descent, and I learned a lot from him. And it was also a very different time in the sense that back then, being vulnerable and showing or displaying emotions was frowned upon, particularly in finance. And I remember my boss telling me, Jeremie, if you aspire to be CFO one day, you need to be a rock where waves comes crashing, whether it's positive waves or negative waves.
Breaks with you.
It breaks with you. And you have to be the rock that guarantees the stability of the team. And there was wisdom in that. But yeah, I think today we are in a different space, and I think it's probably better that way. But that's a different conversation. But to finish answering your question, Josh, was a fantastic 3 years, not only because there was a huge professional challenge, but on the personal side, that's also where I met my wife. So
you've changed these countries, and cultural change is a part of the journey you go through, so that you navigate how to manage the teams that are working with you now, because there is a different culture contrasting to the one that you were in for 3-4 years. What is the biggest sort of curve that you go through when you have managed these teams in different businesses, especially coming out of that coaching period? What was the biggest takeaways for you, and what were the biggest challenges that you now knew, okay, this is the way to approach it? There are a few questions there, so I'll let you.
I'm with you. Look, there is a lot. I think the first starting point was, and that's really what I took from coaching, was to always, keep having a critical look about yourself, and trying to remain honest, which sounds straightforward, but it's not always easy. Not always easy to be honest with others, but not always easy to be honest with oneself, So that's, I think, the first thing that I took with me, which means that it's also embracing my strength, but also embracing my areas of development, and steering them towards my strength. So that's probably the first takeaway. The second takeaway is all about listening, and caring. If you really listen and care, if you put the time to know your people, then regardless of what their cultural environment is, because everyone is different, if you put that time, that gives you the tools to then appropriately manage your different team members. And there are a lot of parameters that you take into account, right? So every leader has a natural style. Mine is fairly democratic, but I can, use other types of management style. Micromanagement is not my thing, but sometimes you do need to micromanage when it's someone who's just starting or someone going through a rough patch. And I think that's also what I learned is that there is not one single management style. It's you adapt your style to your people, to who they are, where they are in their journey, and what are their triggers. So in the soft skills area, one tool that was quite useful for me was the discovery profile. It's based on Jung's
the test you go through with the
right, and then it gives you, it splits the brain into 4 quadrants. Cortical and limbic, upper and lower, and then left brain and right brain, and it gives you like 4 different energies, right? And we all use the four energies, but we all have preferences. So knowing your team from that perspective as well is interesting, because I'm a fiery red, so I'm into action. And at the opposite, you have the green color. So people who don't like exposure. And if you want to reward someone according to the same mechanisms that work for you, but you apply that on someone who has a very different...
it is received in the wrong way.
Absolutely. And it can be completely counterproductive. So if you want to reward me, you give me exposure, you give me an opportunity to take action. And if you do that with someone who's mostly green energy, who are the best team players and the ones who keep really the team grounded, but people who are uncomfortable with exposure. If you put them exposure thinking that that's what you would like as a reward, it becomes completely counterproductive. So, voilà. In a nutshell, it's about being flexible. It's about
do you do that test with your team now when you move into a role?
Look, I've done it every time I had a big team to manage. Usually as part of a large team meeting or even a team building exercise, and it's a nice way to get to know each other. To break ice, to do some gaming around that, and to relate, and to create that cohesion that maybe you don't have or need when you start managing a new team.
Right now, I remember we talked about this in the studios session that we had. There wasn't enough time for me to ask a few follow-up questions, but you're dealing with different generations in one big team, and each of them falling in one of those four quadrants that we're talking about. What is your experience? How are you navigating the expectations of the new generation, the Gen Zs, and then your own generation? Because there is ease. It's a double-edged sword. How do you deal with that?
Trying to be as open-minded as possible, and I think
give me the extreme examples as well, by all means.
Look, I think one of the areas where you can see a massive difference between someone from my generation and younger generations is on tech. Right? And yet tech is at the center of everything. And we are all experiencing digital transformation. It has accelerated with COVID. So it has become also a great unifier. And for me, that's typically the type of areas where I'm sourcing and getting the input from those younger generation when we are discussing digital strategy. What is it that works? What is it that doesn't? Because I acknowledge that the way I grew up is not the way that they grew up, and customers of younger generations today have a total different behavior from mine when I was their age. I got my first cell phone. Was a young adult at the age, I think, of 24. It was one of those massive things. And the only thing they could do is, when you had connection, is to make a phone call that were usually like, hey, oh, up, hello, up. And today I do everything on my phone. So tech has been a great unifier, I think, of generations. What I told you already, I think last time when we spoke about this topic, is that I also acknowledge that those younger generation understood at the age of 25 what I understood at the age of 40, right? Which is the need for work-life balance. When I started my career, I remember, I never thought I would spend 20 years with the same company, but I remember my university teacher saying, you need to spend at least 3 years in a company. And in a job, actually, not in a company, in a job. 1 year to learn, 1 year to seed, 1 year to harvest. This standard is long gone. Those 3 stages are still paramount, but you cross them in
It's
a much
condensed into
absolutely.
now. How long do you think,
Oh, it
in
depends.
your experience?
It depends on talents do that in a year and a half or 2 years. I've applied that to my entire career, and I've usually spent 3 years in a job, and it has quite worked. It has worked quite well for me. So, but yeah, it depends on the talent.
Yeah. And what is your advice to someone that comes into your business right now?
You mean in pharma or in vaccines?
Yeah, in your team when they join, when they look at that time, and when you believe they're not ready yet to move, or they're not exactly having the right mindset about where their placement is within their business, from that learning, seeding, or harvesting period.
What I found works,
Because to add to that, sorry, don't mean to cut you off, but to add to that, I believe the new generation. I believe, my opinion is that they don't give the time to their role as much as you and I were encouraged to do so. And there is a lot of opportunities out there. So most businesses are somewhat spoiled for choice when it comes to candidates, especially in the past 2-3 years. Specifically in Australia is one of those regions. So when you see that happening, what are your initial thoughts?
look, what has always worked for me and what has always been my policy is honest feedback and very candid feedback. So usually when I'm having career conversations, I use my own experience as an example of what I want to illustrate, right? So if I found that I have a talent that has probably not yet harvested everything that it could from the job, then I share my opinion. I said, look, you could probably use 1 more year in the job to learn this, and this, and then that will help you to make even a better move afterwards. And if you remember the conversation we were having with Stephen and Alex, I've faced the situation that Alex had, where he had a team member coming saying, "I'm leaving, I'm taking a finance manager job." He says, "You're selling yourself short." And the guy in the end left 2 months after, but with a CFO role. So when someone wants to leave, you can't retain them. What you can do is help them make the best decision. And it's their choice if they want to listen to you or not. So I've embraced that, and it has worked quite well. The last thing that you want to do is to have a confrontation about it, and to be, as a manager, resentful that person is leaving because you're invested in them, because that's completely counterproductive.
I always believe never convince. It just gives you a little bit more time with them with less value. So
And, if you give them care, attention, and if you show them that you listen, like truly listen, if someone is willing to move or wanting to move or thinking to move, is because there is something that they're not getting.
There's something missing.
And there's something missing. So if you have that conversation, at least and often.
Can you bridge the gap, or are you better off? Yeah.
And often when you work, particularly when you have the chance to work in big organizations, there are plenty of opportunities to address exactly what they need. So I've had many occasions where I had team members leaving finance and moving into commercial operations because they decided they wanted to be GM one day and not CFOs anymore. And they are a fantastic. They're having a great. Those people I have in mind are having a fantastic career. And they're ambassadors because they came from finance. They have a strong finance expertise, and it makes the business even smoother because the more you blur the lines, the more you create connections.
Yeah. Okay, that's fantastic. And you talked about technology, obviously being one of the I suppose the contrasting points when we look at generational differences. In the past year and a half, 2 years, we're looking at technology becoming a little bit more vivid as a need, from the board all the way down to the the leaders of business units and business lines. How are you? What have you done within the business that you think has given you guys the edge?
Look, I've spent half of my career in assurance function, so with always a process approach to everything, right? Meaning when even managing teams, right? When you go through a crisis with someone, let's say they really bugger up, you go through the crisis, you get over the bridge, you solve the crisis, and then you take a time and you sit down and you look at the process. What happened that led to a mistake, and when you do that, you depassionate the conversation. And so my point is, my entire career I've had a process approach, right? So and I'm probably deeply lazy. I don't like to spend and to waste time on useless things. I like my life to be easy.
Yeah.
So simplifying processes and bringing tech into the process is something that I've always strive for. And one thing that I did was to be pioneer in an initiative that then was embraced by the company to simplify the way we do forecasting. We used to have a very lengthy, time-consuming process, but full bottom-up, with a country, cluster, region level, with hundreds of slides, decks, presentation at each level. And in the end, the final numbers, when they were fixed, they had nothing to do with the ones that were at the beginning and were already outdated, right? So what I did is to implement a risk and opportunity approach from a baseline. And long story short, we cut about 1,000 hours on my perimeter at country level that then the country could put back into real added value and into the business. So that's one thing that I've done that I'm quite proud of. Another topic more closer to tech, where I'm trying to be a change catalyst, but it's not coming from me. It's about bringing artificial intelligence. So our CEO has the vision for our company to be the first big pharma with AI at scale.
Okay.
And that means across the board. And he defines AI into two groups, what he calls AI experts, right? So this is really cutting edge, limited group.
Within the business.
Within business, and usually within research and development. It's AI applied to R&D to be a lot faster, to bring a molecule to life. And then he has what he calls Snackable AI, which is AI for the lay
everybody
people,
else.
for everybody else. And he fosters that culture so that we can look for ways of further simplifying. So concretely what it means bringing AI, for instance, into travel and expense processing. So instead of having a shared service where you had little hands going through each and every report, you apply an AI algorithm who's going to learn patterns and who's going to approve almost automatically 70% of expense reports and makes the selection for you of the handful that could be problematic or require added value, require a brain, require a human being to look into them and to analyze. And it's to try and bring that culture everywhere, and realizing that you don't have to rely on big initiatives of the company. You can often do your little part, and it's each drop at every step ends up making a river, and then a lake, and then an ocean. So
where are you within this journey? Are you one of the enablers that has to push the rest of the team to follow through and come along that journey?
Well, I'm deeply convinced that this is the right thing to do. But yeah, fortunately, I'm not the only one. So today it's a trend, and we have the chance to have the tone at the top. I was as I
you
was
set
mentioning,
the tone from the top.
when you have the CEO having those type of discussions and those type of messages, it becomes very easy to implement, because then it becomes top of mind for everyone, right? So in the sense, it's quite easy.
Okay.
I don't have to push too much.
Okay. What does that mean for Snackable AI? The rest of the team is that sort of how is that implemented? Is that sort of weekly practices, or the trainings that they go through?
So there are more and more internal trainings around that, and where you can use it. And we have also a tool that was initially developed by finance.
Okay.
When our CEO arrived, he gave a big spanking to the finance function, because he was like, I'm CEO of 100,000 employees, multinational, 40 billion turnover, and I can't have access to my daily sales. You guys can't tell me how much we're selling today worldwide. So it started with a huge spanking in the face. So we started putting a project together on a very agile methodology, right? So we started with the biggest countries and a handful of the biggest products, and then we added, by MVPs until we had the daily sales, and then we brought AI into it to help us with forecasting and to have an additional scenario that help us forecast. And now this has been replicated in other functions of the company. So that tool has a finance module. That's where all it started. But there is an R&D. There is and to answer your question, the Snackable AI is inviting people to use that tool to help them either predict or identify scenarios that they were not thinking of, but basically being curious of what that AI input can bring, keeping obviously a lot of professional judgment, but being open-minded to welcome the power of AI.
Okay. I want to bring it back to you. I'm actually curious, because you said something just before we started, and you alluded to it during the conversation. You don't know how to explain or answer that question. Your surname is Celdran, and you're from France, and the surname is Spanish.
That's correct.
Unwrap this for us.
I also told you, Josh, that the most complicated question that I can be asked is, where are you from, Jeremie?
Yeah.
And I always feel that I'm falling short when I answer. So obviously, to make it simple, I say I'm French. I was born in Paris, but that doesn't mean much. My dad was born in North Africa, in Algeria, of Spanish and Italian descent. And that's where I got my surname from. My mom is 100% French. Then I happened to grow up in Spain, but that's a total coincidence with my last name. It's just because my dad was an expat, and the longest stint we did was in Madrid for almost 10 years. So I'm bilingual in Spanish. It's my second mother tongue, but it's a complete coincidence with my last name.
Two completely different cultures as well. Wouldn't you say so?
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
One has that love that you were talking about. The other one has that directness.
Yeah,
Best of both worlds, I would say.
The French are very complex. That's the nice way to say. They can be a pain in the ass. That's the less nice way to say. But yeah, look, the French are literally at the crossroads between Anglo-Saxon and Latin cultures, and France is a Latin country, but with very strong Anglo-Saxon influence. Spain is a fantastic country to live in. Some of my best memories are from my childhood in Spain. It's really a great country.
Okay. Well, look, it's been great to have you with us today. I thank you for your time and for some of the practical advice that was in there.
Thanks
Jeremie.
a lot.
Cheers.